The Explainer, The Polyester Prince, Part 2, Lessons from the Souk. All right, let's jump right back in. At the end of Part 1, we left a young Dhirubhai finishing high school in Junagadh, staring down that ultimate question: what exactly comes next? Well, following a centuries-old tradition for young Gujarati men from his community, the 16-year-old packs up and leaves his rural home for the Arabian trading port of Aden. He's heading out to get a real-world commercial education.
And wow, the visual shock of stepping off that steamer in the early 1950s must have been absolutely profound. I mean, picture this. You leave the dry, dusty, dun-colored landscape of rural Gujarat, and suddenly you arrive in this bustling harbor. You've got these brilliant oil-slicked blue waters clashing right up against steep, dark brown volcanic crags. Now, for generations, young men from Kathiawar traveled to these Arabian ports to grind it out, gain experience, and build up some capital. But you have to understand, Dhirubhai was arriving at a very specific, explosive moment in Aden's history.
Aden was in the middle of an absolute economic boom. It was a massive British military and trading outpost, all fueled by the East African shilling, and it was quickly becoming the ultimate commercial training ground. British Petroleum was building a massive new oil refinery, shipping in over 11,000 workers to get it done. On top of that, a growing British military presence was driving a huge construction boom. And because it sat smack in the middle of the trade routes between Europe and Asia, Aden was literally on track to overtake New York as the biggest ship bunkering port in the entire world. So to navigate this booming economy, Dhirubhai leaned on his personal contacts. His older brother Ramnikbhai was actually already there, working in the automotive division for this massive French firm called Besse Co. Through that connection, Dhirubhai got hired as a clerk, joining the company's rapidly expanding Shell Petroleum Products division. And to give you a sense of the sheer scale of the business education he was stepping into, Besse Co. controlled an astonishing 80% of the region's commerce. 80%! Founded by Antonin Besse, this colossal trading house handled literally everything. We're talking animal hides and incense all the way to cars, cameras, and oil products across the entire Arab world and the Horn of Africa. For these young clerks, life was actually pretty comfortable. They were based in Aden's Crater District, which was this fantastic tax-free haven. You'd have about 14 young men living together in a bachelor mess, paying a grand total of just 400 shillings a month for food. This setup allowed them to save fully half of their salaries. And within this tight-knit Gujarati expatriate community, Dhirubhai immediately stood out. He was physically robust, he walked with these heavy, deliberate footsteps, and he had this wildly outgoing, confident personality. He simply refused to blend into the background. Honestly, the guy just had a completely natural appetite for risk. There's this famous story from his early days working down by the ships in the harbor. Someone made a bet that he couldn't dive off one of the bunkering ships and swim all the way back to the shore. The prize? Just an ice cream party. But Dhirubhai didn't even hesitate. He dove right in and swam through harbor waters that were notoriously known for occasional shark attacks outside the safety nets. All of that just to win a bet for some ice cream? This kind of bold physical confidence actually earned him the nickname Gama, after a famous Indian wrestler from that era. But it really wasn't just about his physical presence. He had this deeply disruptive commercial energy about him. One of his colleagues famously described his habit of stirring up pandemonium as, quote, letting loose a scorpion. Underneath his friendly, affable exterior, his coworkers could see this relentless, growing ambition. He was already getting deeply uncomfortable with the idea of just being someone else's employee. But before he could break out on his own, he had to learn the actual mechanics of the trade. As he learned the ropes, Besse sent him out on these absolutely grueling sales routes to push Shell and Burma lubricants. And let me tell you, this was not glamorous business travel. We're talking week 1, taking traditional wooden dhows across the rough Red Sea to French Somaliland. Week 2, selling in Berbera and Hargeisa. Week 3, trading up in Asmara and Mogadishu. Week 4, pushing deep into Ethiopia. The lodgings were incredibly rough. Finding food was a nightmare for a strict vegetarian. But these harsh, exhausting conditions, they forged his deep understanding of international trade routes and how to handle brutal negotiations. Right in the middle of all this wild ambition and grueling travel, Dhirubhai managed to establish a really crucial anchor in his life. In 1954, at 22 years old, he married Kokilaben, the daughter of a postmaster from Jamnagar. Now, it wasn't exactly a high society, financially advantageous match, but they shared the same Modh-Bania heritage. More importantly, she provided a powerful grounding force of traditional values and religious piety. It was the perfect counterbalance to his aggressive, restless business instincts. Then, global events suddenly threw his education into overdrive. In 1956, the Suez Crisis erupts. Egypt nationalizes the canal, and practically overnight, Aden's strategic importance goes through the roof. Because of this, Dhirubhai suddenly finds himself managing the Shell refueling operations at the Aden military base. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. This gave him a front-row seat to the massive BP oil refinery, giving him vital, early exposure to the crazy scale, logistics, and interconnected linkages of the global petroleum industry. But you know what? His real education actually started after 4:30 p.m. When the Besse office is closed for the day, Dhirubhai didn't just go home and kick his feet up. He headed straight for the Aden Souk, the local marketplace. Now, the company had very strict rules explicitly prohibiting employees from private trading, but he didn't care. He relentlessly studied the Arab, Indian, and Jewish traders. He watched exactly how they negotiated, how they hoarded goods, and how they capitalized on wild price fluctuations in commodities like rice and sugar. Pretty soon, just studying the market was enough for him. He spots this bizarre, almost unbelievable discrepancy. The solid silver Yemeni rial coin was actively circulating in the souk, right? But the value of the actual physical silver inside the coin was higher than the coin's official exchange rate against the British pound. So what does he do? He puts out an open order in the souk to buy up as many rials as humanly possible. He melts them down into silver ingots and ships them off to sell directly to bullion dealers in London. This arbitrage scheme is absolutely brilliant, and it captures his mindset perfectly. As Dhirubhai himself later put it, quote, "The margins were small, but it was money for jam. I don't believe in not taking opportunities." It was such a calculated, clever move, and he netted substantial profits from it, right up until the Yemeni treasury finally realized their currency was literally vanishing and put a stop to it. However, trading on his own account wasn't always a magical success story. He also stared into the abyss. During one major private commodity trade, a massive incoming cargo of sugar he had heavily invested in got ruined by seawater. His buyer flat out refused to take delivery. Suddenly facing total financial ruin while waiting forever for an insurance claim, Dhirubhai got caught in a massive squeeze. He was desperately begging his Besse colleagues to pass the hat and give him bailout loans just to survive. Now, one of those colleagues was a man named Junagadh, who lent him 5,000 shillings. And the historical accounts of their relationship are pretty complex and actually conflict with each other, so it's important we look at both versions here. In version A, the company finds out about their illicit private trading, and Junagadh heroically takes the fall. He resigns so Dhirubhai can keep his job. But in version B, Junagadh simply invests his own money into Dhirubhai's highly risky rice and sugar deals and loses most of his capital. Whichever version is the absolute truth, the historical record shows Dhirubhai felt a massive, lifelong debt to him, making sure Junagadh was financially supported right up until his death decades later. Surviving this crazy roller coaster, the wild successes, the near ruin, the calculated risks, and these complex personal debts, it cemented a profound shift in Dhirubhai's psychology. He had truly mastered the flow of international goods. He understood the brutal realities of market fluctuations, and most of all, he had tasted the absolute thrill of trading on his own account. The conclusion for him was absolute. There was no way he could continue working as somebody else's employee. And as it turns out, his timing to leave was unwittingly perfect. He couldn't have known the full extent of it at the time, but Aden's days as this prosperous colonial haven were severely numbered. Sandblasted by rising pan-Arabic nationalism, the environment was growing hostile. By 1967, British forces would withdraw entirely. A Marxist regime would take over, abolish private property, and completely appropriate Besse and Company. That massive trading empire that had essentially served as his university, it would just vanish into history. But back in 1958, Dhirubhai was finally ready to make his move. He had carefully accumulated exactly 7 years of service with Besse. And why does that matter? Because under the colony's laws, 7 years granted him the official right of residence in Aden. It was a vital, carefully calculated fallback plan, just in case his next big move ended in total disaster. So he packs up his life, his wife Kokileben, and their first child and prepares to leave. After all those grueling years of travel, sweating in the souk, and surviving ruined shipments, he departs Aden with exactly 29,000 East African shillings. To put that in perspective, that's about $3,000 US. As his friends bluntly warned him as he was leaving, back in India, that amount of capital was basically just chutney. Aden had given Dhirubhai his first, incredibly intense, real-world education in international commerce. He arrived as a young, wide-eyed clerk, and was leaving as a hardened, fiercely ambitious trader. But as he sails back toward the shores of his homeland in 1958, a pretty daunting question remains. Is a mere $3,000 and a massive appetite for risk really enough to survive the notoriously dangerous, cutthroat world of Indian business? We're going to uncover that answer in Part 3.